Because if a woman is no longer allowed to say no to a man in the bathroom or say no to a man in the locker room, what's to stop us from saying that a woman can no longer say no to a man in the bedroom? Where does this stop? Because how far are we going to allow this guise of inclusivity to take us and strip women away, their rights away from them? And it's already happening because we know that we are putting men in female prisons, and these women are getting raped and they're getting pregnant. And it's not being reported as a man raping a woman because that man identifies as a woman. And I just want to make it perfectly clear. Women don't get women pregnant when they're raped.
So should men compete with women in women's sports? We're going to talk about that, but first, subscribe and like our channel. Click on that little bell icon for notifications, and find the Devil's Advocate podcast on your favorite platform. Rich Guggenheim with Gays Against Groomers. Obviously, what is Gays Against Groomers?
The purpose, we are an organization of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people who oppose the medicalization, sexualization, and the indoctrination of children under the guise of LGBTQ inclusion. So, great topic today.
I want to make sure I've got this. So as a group of LGBT folks who are concerned about, let me put it in my terms, trans indoctrination of sexualizing our kids too early and telling them that they're transgendered when most likely they're not.
Right.
Am I pretty close?
Yeah.
What brings you into this, by the way? I've asked you before, but I'm curious. Out of all the things to care about, why do you care about this one?
Well, I will tell you why I care about this pretty frankly speaking, John. What we're doing to children is wrong. And it's a form of woke homophobia and woke misogyny.
Two trains are running at the same track at each other. Woke homophobia, and woke misogyny.
Yep.
Now, as a certified misogynist, I got to say, I'm not following you.
Well, that's probably because you're not woke.
There you go.
So that's part of it. But it really is, if you think about what's happening right now, this whole gender ideology is an ideology that confuses our children. We're telling them that in order to accept yourself, you have to change your body. You have to mutilate it. You have to sterilize. And this really is a harmful process because it is not reversible. It causes a lifetime of medical intervention, and it leads to an increase in suicidal rates and severe depressive disorders. In fact, severe depressive orders in youth before they are allowed to transition is roughly about 13-14%. After they transition, the number of youth who identify as transgender with severe depressive disorder increases to 58%. So to me, one of the problems is we aren't addressing underlying medical issues, and it is a modern day form of conversion therapy because a majority of the youth who are going through this process are lesbian, gay, or bisexual, and there's this idea being planted in their head, so they go through this process. And we know that roughly 80% of those youth who are allowed to progress through adolescence and puberty without gender intervention reconcile with their natal sex and go on to live happy, healthy, productive lives as gay, lesbian, bisexual adults.
You use the term conversion therapy. I remember early on, while the gay movement was growing, the anti-gay movement was really about Jesusing the gay out of you. And if we put gay guys through conversion therapy, we can help them understand they're not really gay. Or if they are really gay, we can teach them not to act and to be celibate on that. And it was a very popular thing that concerned parents who were somehow freaked out about their kids being gay. It was like, well, we're gonna send you to the camp and we're gonna get the gay right out of you. Don't worry, it's the devil talking. And it really messed up a lot of kids. I've got a lot of friends who were forced through that kind of stupidity, and it really hurt them. I'm seeing the same thing now with this trans indoctrination. People who are confused instead of saying we're going to Jesus the gay out of you. No, we're going to trans into you, and that's going to solve your problems of not feeling like you fit in, because no 13-year-old feels like he or she fits in.
Exactly. Yeah. 13, that was a long time ago for me. And I can remember how awkward it was. And I didn't have a place where I always felt like I was kind of ambiguous. And I think even at that age, I had a sense that there was something different about me, even though I didn't understand what it was. And
how old were you when you knew you were gay? Just out of curiosity.
I would say I was probably 16 or 17 when I knew that I was gay. And I actually, back then when I was younger, obviously being gay had some very different connotations because it was during the AIDS crisis of the 90s. And, it was just kind of assumed that if you're gay, you're going to get AIDS and you're going to die. And of course, the religious right had their whole entire talking point about that stuff. But today, when we're talking about gender ideology, children at that age are going through the biggest transformation a human being goes through at any point in their life. And it's awkward. You don't feel like you fit into your body. You're looking at yourself in the mirror. And, I can remember as a teenager having the acne and the pimples, and I felt like my teeth didn't match my face. And it just was a very uncomfortable time. And your personalities are starting to really develop at that age. And it is only natural for you to not understand what's going on. And I think it's wrong for any adult to try and tell a child that in order for you to accept yourself, you have to change who you are. That's not inclusive.
Let me push back on that. You said you were about 16 or 17 before you really understood you were gay. Well, what about that guy who thinks I'm a woman and he's 16 or 17? And why can't he accept, hey, I'm a woman, and now because of that, I want to look like a woman. I want to present as a woman. I want people to call me by a woman's name. That's how I know I am. What's really the difference between the two?
Well, the difference between the two really comes down to what we know from the numbers and the science of all of this. If that was really who that person was at that age, at 16 or 17, and they went through with that, I don't think you would see the numbers that say those who are allowed to progress through without intervention reconciling with their natal sex. The other piece of it is they have such a high rate of post-transition regret. So they've done some studies, and there's not a large body of evidence on long-term longitudinal studies. They're usually at the most 5 years post-transitioning, that a third within 5 years expressed post-transition regret. And I think that when we understand that, it's almost like buyer's remorse. And I don't think a lot of times these youth, and they're starting them out at 12 with these surgeries and these wrong sex hormones and these puberty blockers, it's not a reversible process. If you go buy a car and you realize after a year or 2 years that you don't like the car, you can take it back to the dealership and trade it in for something else. But in the case of your body, you have permanently altered it. You have scarred it, you have mutilated it, you have stunted its natural development. You cannot undo that.
I'll agree that a third of people who go through this and transition end up regretting it. That is an enormous number. If you said, there's a 1 in 3 chance you are really going to regret this, do you take the chance? But conversely, 2/3 of them.
But that's only within 5 years. We have no...
But 2/3 of them in 5 years don't regret it.
Right.
And probably are happy they made that decision.
The other thing that I think we aren't really doing a fair job in our research on this is studying the long-term effects of it. But there's also, when you go through this process, and if you've ever heard any of the stories of detransitioners, they talk about when they come out as trans, they're openly affirmed and welcomed and showered with love by this community. And so it can be really hard when you're in a situation like that to all of a sudden say to that community that has become everything you know. It is very cult-like in that regard. So to speak out against that and say, I don't necessarily feel like this is who I am anymore, means that you are going to lose your entire support network. You're going to lose all your friends. You're going to lose, in a lot of situations, your access to medical care. And in some situations, it is against the law to detransition. So a medical
How could it be against the law?
Because, for example, in Colorado, that is considered a form of conversion therapy legally. Medical practitioners can assist you in transitioning, but they're not allowed to assist you in detransitioning.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah.
Because it sure seems like, hey, now I feel like this. I'm gender fluid, and now I call me a guy again. It seems like that would be perfectly legal and perfectly fine. But what I'm hearing from you is this indoctrination cult, my words, is so welcoming. It pushes kids to think that if you don't feel right, it's because you're in the wrong body. Every teenager's in the wrong body. Absolutely every single one of them. And hey, if you go back to being your original gender, you're going to lose all this. You're going to lose your community. Yeah. So you think they're more than a third regret it, but they just can't say it?
I believe that's the case. And I think that's why you see the numbers of people who come out of this and say, I regret it, and the number of people who are outwardly outspoken about this are so small. And I think the other thing that is really an issue at the core of all of this is it isn't just a case of you lose your support network and you lose your community. They actively target you to try and cancel you.
Can you give me an example?
I will speak from my own personal experience, my own lived experience. When I started speaking out against this gender ideology, I'm sure you know that I have been banned from Trade, one of the gay bars in Denver. They have sent me death threats. These trans activists target me online. I am again going through a situation at work with my employer where they are trying to get me fired because of my stance on gender ideology being incompatible with the views of my employer. And these are targeted attacks. They're not just one person calling up. Sometimes they'll get a network of these people who work for these organizations across the country to coordinate attacks, and my employer will get dozens of emails and phone calls about me to try and get me fired. So, and this isn't a coordinated attack that they do against me. They kick me out of the community. They ban me from these things. They target me online. They send me death threats. I don't think that there's a person in the world who wouldn't feel vulnerable in those situations.
So, as a gay man, you have been kicked out of a gay bar.
Banned.
Banned.
Banned from a gay bar.
Because of your feelings on this. Let me just bring it up a little bit more. The clock changes. The kid is now 18 years old. He is technically emancipated, or half emancipated by our laws today. Then are you all right with him making permanent changes to his body?
That is that individual's choice at that point in time. I would still say that even at 18, you have not fully developed your prefrontal cortex and maybe still lack some of those critical thinking skills. Although, to be perfectly honest, I think there may be some 40-year-old men who lack that ability. But if that's your choice, that is your choice. And I say this a lot to people when I'm out talking about gender ideology, and I will get hate from both sides. You know, I've had these conservative people when I've been traveling across the state say, well, I agree with what you're saying, but I just can't support your lifestyle. And, you know, I tell them the same thing that I tell trans and vegans. I'm like, you are fine to believe whatever it is you want to believe in, but you are not okay to impose your beliefs on other people. So believe whatever you want to believe in, but I am under no obligation to buy a ticket to your circus.
Colorado has legal weed, legal alcohol, and you have to be 21. The experts say on cannabis, really, your brain hasn't fully formed until you're probably 25. And so we've pushed this age that says you can't do these things to yourself until you're 21, even though you're emancipated at 18, which makes no sense to me, because it could do permanent harm to you. But on this, when somebody says, no, I want the permanent change, you don't have to wait to 18. I find that a little bizarre.
You know, I'll tell you what was really fascinating to me. I was in a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, and I was there to testify on one of the bills. It was a bill it was for non-legal name changes. So it was House Bill 1039. But right before that, they were hearing a bill and taking testimony on a bill that would require the state to work with these online social media companies to put a pop-up notification for children that, hey, you've spent this much time on TikTok or whatever application that they're on, and let them know that you've been on for 2 hours, you've been on for 3 hours, et cetera. And the reason for that was because they were the experts were testifying that these children lacked the ability to understand the consequences of their decision. And ironically enough, it was these same exact experts on the very next bill saying that we should be allowing these children to legally change their name and their gender identities, and we should be affirming that.
Yeah, I just gotta love the thought process here. And it's special interest politics. It's identity politics 101. This thing is bad because we don't like kids doing that. This one, we like kids doing that because if you're going to be LGBT, you're likely going to be on our team. This is all dandy.
Well, and I think you have to understand the money behind the gender machine.
Yeah, help me with that one. Who pays for this?
This is people like the Pritzkers and the Strikers and the Gills, Tim Gill. These people with a lot of money are behind this. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why Colorado is such a hotbed for this type of stuff. But the other piece of it is you have the big pharmaceutical industries behind this, big medical industries behind it. You have big psychology behind all of this. And then, of course, you got mainstream media, our education system from the universities all the way down to pre-K now are all on board with this entire thing. And then you've got government, and you have the LGBT, I call it the alphabeti spaghetti industry, is all on board with pushing this agenda. And when people like me, and there's a whole bunch of, I have so many gay friends, even right here in Denver, who aren't part of this organization, who will come to me in private and say, Rich, I agree with what you do. In fact, some of the owners of major gay establishments in Denver have come to me and said, I completely agree with what you say and what you stand for. But if I said anything, I would lose my livelihood.
It's amazing to me that the coalition that has done so much for gay rights over the last couple decades will not stand up to this. And I've talked to the same folks, type of folks who are gay, and they're like, I didn't sign on for that. I didn't sign on for forcing people to use the wrong pronouns. I didn't sign on to indoctrinate little kids and to mutilate their bodies. I didn't sign on to that. I signed on for us to have a safe lifestyle, for us to be recognized, for us to be able to get married, and to be accepted.
Exactly.
And after that, when I started this, it was the LBG, and that was it. 3 choices. And now the alphabet soup is crazy. Why don't more gays stand up and say, too far, count me out, I am up against this?
Well, I think it's because of the very same thing that you see happen to people like me. I have, Gays Against Groomers has been deplatformed from major tech companies. We can't use Vistaprint. We've been banned on social media platforms. It's because when you look at this is what I mean by woke homophobia. And we get targeted and we get smeared as being this far-right extreme group of people, right? Even though, to me, this is not about left versus right. This is just about common sense. And when we get smeared and attacked like that, a lot of people are just like, I'm tapping out. I'm not getting involved in this. Or they see what's happened to people who have been on the front lines and organizations who have been on the front line. And when I say this is a form of homophobia, and then one of the reasons we get called far right is because the only people who will platform us and give us the time to talk about this are the more conservative media outlets.
So I remember gays saying it is hostile out there to be gay. I have to keep my gayness in the closet. I remember in the 80s, the big fight in the movement was, do you out people who are gay? If people only knew Rock Hudson was gay, boy, that could change a lot of minds. If we forced out your cousin, well, then you go, what? My cousin's a nice guy. That's not a pervert. Now we're beating up on gays again if they step up and say, the movement has gone too far.
Exactly.
Now those gays are in the closet again because they don't support the trans indoctrination. You had a couple of initiatives you were trying to get on the ballot. What would they have done? What did you learn?
Well, I will tell you, John, I learned a lot. I just want to start off by saying to everybody that was part of this, it was an all volunteer effort. And I traveled to 64 counties across Colorado doing this in 80 days. It was an ambitious effort. I met fantastic people, Democrats, libertarians, Republicans, veterans. I even went to a Pride event and got signatures at a Pride event because people were like, hey, this is common sense. So thank you to everybody who helped make this happen.
And the initiatives would have done what?
The two initiatives were 142, which would have required parental notification when a child at school discloses gender incongruence. And so a lot of people are like, oh, this is just outing a trans child. And in a lot of ways, I'm going to push back on that. This is simply telling the parent that your child has come to us and this is how they're identifying at school. And this gives that parent the opportunity to understand and have the package of knowledge that they need. So it reduces anxiety for that child.
My kids can't even get an aspirin at school without signing 500 papers. And people talk about public education as an indoctrination. I've seen it. With COVID, I've heard it. When you listen to your kids' classes online, you go, I now know it for a fact. And the idea that you send your kid to a government institution for the greater percentage of a day, and you don't know what's going on with your own minor child. The bill that they just passed allows school districts to say that that kid can identify in a different way, and the parents don't know. Now, at the same time, these teachers, all of them are, I'm trying to remember the right term.
Trusted adults?
No, forced reporters.
Mandated reporters.
Mandated reporters,
yes.
That's a term. That if something is going on and they feel that that kid is being harmed at home, they got to pick up the phone, talk to the police, and let them know. But if something's going on in school, they're not allowed to tell the parents. That is sick.
Well, I'm going to follow up on that. Just the reason, if you listen to the advocates that are pushing these types of pieces of legislation, and it's not just in Colorado, it's all over the United States. Colorado, it was House Bill 1039. They just passed a similar bill in California, I believe it was 1955. And it's happening all over. And the reason they're doing this is because they say, oh, well, if the child was outed to the parents, that child could face child abuse at home and all kinds of bad things would happen at home.
Or they could get a lot of support.
That's true. But here's the thing. These teachers are already mandated reporters. So if without this protection in place, one could logically assume that it is already happening that children are being outed at home with gender incongruence, and they would be facing that discrimination and that abuse already. These teachers, as mandated reporters, are required by law to be reporting it if that is happening. But there's no data that shows that this is actually happening. And I don't believe it is happening. I believe that this was literally a situation where this was a solution in search of a problem.
What's the other initiative?
It was 160. 160 was very basic. It just made it so that there are 3 categories of sports in K through 12. Boys played in boys. Girls played in girls, and coeducational, which was mixed. And if you were to play on the girls' team or on a female league, you could only be a female. So it was to protect girls' sports.
The world got a real wake-up call at the Olympics when the person from Serbia in the girls' boxing just destroyed a female boxer from Italy. She had to throw the fight. She said, I've never been hit like that. You see what happened with Riley Gaines and a swimmer who was nationally ranked in the mid 300s, wins national championships as soon as he identifies as a girl. I've seen cases in volleyball where girls have gotten concussions because a boy on the team is spiking the ball. There is a biological difference. And there was a time that we stood up for women. There was a time we stood up for girls, and we wanted them to have the same protections as boys. So that's why Title IX was there.
Yes. I would suggest, though, that Imam Khalif situation in the Olympics is slightly different, because that is a situation where there's stories that he has XY chromosomes, which from a chromosomal standpoint of view makes that person a male, but also had female genitalia. And that is a rare medical condition. And I think we do a huge disservice to those people who have these abnormalities that happen. They're still biologically either male or female. They're not transgender. They may be intersex. And I think that does a disservice to those people, and it really devalues their place at the table.
I feel sorry for the person. At the same
time, it's not fair to the women who are getting the crap beat out of them. And when we talk about men in sports, males in female sports, there's, as you said, a biological advantage that men have. Physiologically, we know they're bigger. They have denser bone tissue. They have more muscle mass. They have bigger lungs. They have stronger heart, more blood volume can pump through the heart. So there is a biological difference. And they also produce testosterone. That is where the XY chromosome and anatomy come into play. But it's more than that, though. When we start talking about boys and girls sports, we're now telling these women that no matter how hard you train, no matter how hard you work, you're no longer good enough. And under this guise of inclusion, you have to forfeit your spot on the team to a man who feels like a woman. It's no longer inclusive because now that team of girls is no longer good enough, and so they have to throw a man on the team in order for them to be competitive. And in a day and age when collegiate athletics is all about winning championships, bringing in money, scholarships, these girls are now being forced to forfeit that scholarship, forfeit that opportunity to go to college, get the education, career advancement. And not only that, there's a whole host of things, because now we're dealing with the social emotional piece of it. And it's not just that. I really am concerned about the fact that this is stripping women's ability to give consent. Oh, it's taking that away.
Consent for what?
Consent, just consent. Because if a woman is no longer allowed to say no to a man in the bathroom or say no to a man in the locker room, what's to stop us from saying that a woman can no longer say no to a man in the bedroom? Where does this stop? Because how far are we going to allow this guise of inclusivity to take us and strip women away, their rights away from them? And it's already happening, because we know that we are putting men in female prisons, and these women are getting raped and they're getting pregnant. And it's not being reported as a man raping a woman because that man identifies as a woman. And I just want to make it perfectly clear. Women don't get women pregnant when they're raped.
It goes back to the question at the Olympics. Is being a woman what your genitals look like, or is it your chromosomes? I believe it's your chromosomes. And I understand there are rare cases of abnormalities and there's a small gray area. But overwhelmingly, there are people with XX chromosomes and people with XY chromosomes. It is binary. At the same time, I really got to say this, because when you say something as simple as that, you're immediately transphobic, you're a racist, you're this. No, I am happy if an adult wants to identify as a porcupine, go for it. It's your right to identify any way you like. You don't have the right to my speech. You don't have the right to tell me how I need to refer to people. And all over the country, all over the world perhaps, there are people who go to a job and they use the wrong pronoun and they get disciplined. They could lose their job. Now, in their eyes, it's lie or lose your job. Show your kids that you are lying or lose your job. Look at one person and call them a plural. Look at a man and call that person a woman. And for that guy's belief, his observation is, no, that's a woman. You cannot force me to lie. Yes, we can, because you're kicked out of school, you're ostracized, you're canceled, you lose your job. But I'm not telling the guy who identifies as a woman that you shouldn't identify as a woman. I really don't care. And more power to you. That's a free society. You think you're a woman? Go be a woman. I think you're a man. I'm going to call you a man. We're both okay. That's what happens in a free society. And I'm surprised there are not more trans people who go, I know what you're saying. You can't tell me how to identify, and I can't tell you what words to use. And that's mutual respect.
I think part of the problem is this attitude of entitlement that comes along with this whole entire thing where and they're also trying to manipulate this into a situation where if you don't use my pronouns, you don't have respect. And I think you know, perhaps your viewers don't know, where I stand on that entire thing. I am not going to let someone compel my speech. If you are a man, I'll call you a man. I grew up in a day and age where you just said, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. And now that suddenly is offensive because you don't know how somebody may identify as, and I don't really care how you identify. I don't believe it's kind and compassionate to affirm delusions. I don't believe it's kind to women, and I'm not even going to use the word cis, I'm just going to say women. I don't believe it's kind and compassionate to women to say that someone who just feels like a woman can now all of a sudden appropriate what a woman is and appropriate women's spaces.
If a person with an XY chromosome feels like I have a XX chromosome, and the official documents for the government, the arbiters of truth, the guys who are supposed to say, here are the records of you bought a house, you didn't buy a house, you own this property, you own that property. We have records. You were born, this is your fingerprint, you died. These things are kept by the government. And for a governmental document to lie and go, oh, we can change that part of your birth certificate, and now officially you've changed genetically, then I should be able to change my age to what age I identify with. I identify as a guy with hair. I can identify with these ways, and it should be the same. But when I say, what about age? If I identify as somebody who's 30 years old because I feel like I'm 30 years old, and my God damn it, I am 30 years old, I am denied that.
My question goes beyond that, though. When we start talking about just the simple fact of how we identify and how we choose to identify, that has consequences legally, because now let's talk about how are we going to report a crime committed by one of these people. And you already see the way the media is reporting it. If this person identifies as a woman, we are reporting it as a woman. If they're in prison or they're in the judicial system and they identify as a woman, even though biologically they're a man, and we know from the statistics that a majority of the violent crimes and sexual assaults are carried out by men. But now if they just decide that they identify as a woman, we're no longer reporting that factually based off of the biological markers of the individual, reporting it based off of the feelings of the individual. So we're misreporting crime data.
Indulge me on this one. We trust the government to tell us the truth.
I don't know why.
I don't know why. There was a small case. I love little small cases because they help illustrate bigger ideas. There was some highway up in the mountains that was dangerous, or there was some snow on it or something. And the folks at the highway department, now called CDOT, thought, we just don't want people driving on that. It's a dangerous road. So they put out the bulletin that it was snow covered. They lied. And it got caught. They had to put out a little correction. Oh, the reason we did that is we didn't want people to endanger themselves. I don't give a damn why you did it. I care that you did it. You put out knowingly false information and you're the government.
Mm-hmm.
All right. What you just put forward of we've now classified this not as a male rape, as something else. No, you are falsifying the observable truth. And that is dangerous.
Yeah.
At some point, and this is tinfoil hat stuff, but at some point, I got to think this is the best Chinese psyop there is. How do you want to destroy your enemies? Well, you get them to question reality, and you get them to use TikTok to say up is down and men are women, and before you know it, the place can't think straight.
Right. And I believe this really is a situation that we are witnessing in real time, where if we can get society to believe that a person with XY chromosomes is a woman or female, there's nothing that we can't get them to believe. And it's like, well, the programming at this point is complete.
Again, I'm just going to repeat it again. If you're trans, more power to you. I will protect and fight for your right to believe you're a woman. I expect you to fight for my right to free speech, to identify as a guy who uses pronouns this way. That is what is mutual respect. And when the gay movement moved forward, there were no lies. It wasn't that, he's gay. I'm going to call him gay. He calls himself gay. We all agree. You're having sex with men, good chance you're gay. But now we can't have these discussions because feelings count more.
Well, John, I'll tell you a perfectly good example. I've had the situation where I have had trans people who are female biologically come up to me and ask me, like, are you interested in trans people? I'm like, no, I'm a homosexual. Well, so am I. Honey, you're a female, you're a woman, you have the wrong body parts, and I'm not into that. I think the word you're looking for is heterosexual, and what you're doing is a form of sexual harassment via entrapment, coercion, and...
What is a trans woman lesbian? You have a penis and you want to have sex with women. How can you be a lesbian? That doesn't work.
It's a form of colonization. It's appropriation. And I think it really goes back to what I said earlier about the entitlement attitude that a lot of these people come from, and they present themselves with as a woman. And if you're a woman and you're a lesbian and you're at a lesbian bar, we have a lesbian bar in Denver. And unfortunately, the sad reality is very few of the people who go there now are lesbians, because the women don't feel safe going to these bars and being in these spaces with men. And I don't care, you can identify.
I never even thought about that. So let me just get it back to you. So lesbian bars, where women could meet women in a safe place, kind of like gay bars used to be. Now it's lesbians and trans there. Yeah. So there's a bunch of guys with penises there. And now the women are like, wait, that's not what I wanted in this place.
Yeah. And you can wear a dress, you can wear lipstick and oversized high heels all you want, but that doesn't make you a woman. And it's appropriation. And lesbians have been sounding the alarm on this for over a decade, and now all of a sudden it's starting to happen in gay male spaces. And so this really is the erasure of sex and the legal definition of sex and sex-based rights, and the appropriation of our spaces for homosexual people under the guise of inclusivity by these people who are stealing our language, stealing our fight, and stealing our identities.
Again, going back to it, because I've got to say it over and over. If you're a dude and you want to wear a dress, good on you. I don't care. And when I say that, people think I'm lying. No, I'm not lying. Good for you. I'm trying to remember, was it the band Fish? I used to do lights, and the drummer would always wear a skirt. Why? I don't know. Great.
It's really a case where, I know some people who are the old transgender people, the transsexuals, they call themselves, or the transvestites. And they are really the live and let live kind of people. And they're great people. In fact, a lot of that generation of transgender people I've talked to are like, I do not agree with pushing this onto children. And I think that that's a great voice and a great perspective because they've lived through the process. But what we're seeing is also they say, I just wanted to live my life as the person that I was. And they sincerely try to blend in and really look like the sex that they were trying to mimic. But nowadays, you got these people who are like, oh, I'm transgender. And it's like, well, what makes you transgender? Is it your purple hair and pierced septum? And it's just this mind-blowing thing where they make no effort to try and actually look like the sex they're trying to mimic. They make no effort to blend in. And it really is about them trying to impose their values on everybody else. And that's where we have the problem.
You say older trans folks. It popped into my mind, my bachelor party back in 1992, we're bar hopping. I'm at a urinal in some crazy little bar, and Marilyn Monroe is in the urinal next to me. And I'm like, and she looked pretty good. But it was a guy using the urinal. And today, that person, I guess, would be pressured to use the women's room. I mean,
That's a whole question that I think is one of the things that we really got to start talking about is, well, and I think that's where the whole gender neutral restroom thing came into be. And I don't have a problem with that to be perfectly honest with you. If you want to use the gender neutral restroom, I mean, John, there's times where I go to the airport and I've been flying all day long and I got to go to the bathroom and, I'm just like, I'm going to use the gender neutral restroom.
They're great things. I have a handicapped son. I have to help him in the bathroom. A handicapped bathroom is really, really great. Because he sometimes needs to strip down, and I don't want to do that in the men's room.
Yeah. Yep.
So, hey, let's get to finish this up. You were unsuccessful in getting these initiatives on the ballot because it was a volunteer effort. It was a volunteer effort,
and as you know, the process with going through your own initiative processes, there's a 6-month timeline to gather those signatures. We had 80 days because we had to appeal it all the way to the Colorado Supreme Court. And once we got that done, we also, as an all-volunteer effort, had to get the volunteers in place, train the volunteers, get the petitions in their hand, and get them motivated and keep them motivated.
If there's one area of the political machine I understand because I've lived it, it's the initiative process. Even if you had the full 6 months, I don't think you would have been able to get it done, not as a volunteer effort. So my question is, will you be coming back with something? Will you try it again?
Yes.
What's going to be different?
What's going to be different, I think, is the fact that we already have that core base of volunteers in place. I think in 80 days, the fact that we got over halfway there. And, we need 120,000 signatures. So we are well over halfway there in 80 days. We're on about 1,000 signatures a day. And I think if we had 6 months, we'd be really close. But I think we're going to be able, and here's the thing, we were all over the state of Colorado, talking to people, having conversations with people, creating awareness about the things that are being done to their children in the schools and what's happening to girls in sports. And the conversation was simple. There is nothing inclusive about excluding parents from the process of raising their children, and there is nothing inclusive about denying girls a fair and safe place to compete.
You think you're going to be able to get some funding next time?
I think that we're going to be able to go back to our donors and say, look at all of the things that we accomplished in just 80 days, and we will be able to get funding.
I believe your initiatives will pass pretty handily. You need to get them on the ballot. That's going to be the tough part. People want more information. Where do they go?
For me, I always encourage people to check us out at Gays Against Groomers. Our website, gaysagainstgroomers.com. The ballot initiatives, we're going to keep fighting. Stay in touch with that. Go to protectkidscolorado.org.
They go to gaysagainstgroomers.com, did you say?
Yes.
Can they get hold of you personally if they want to talk with you?
They can send an email. I am on X I'm on X and all the other social media platforms. Okay. 5280 based homo, and that's my brand. 5280 based homo.
So if I go to X, you're 5280
based homo.
Based homo.
Yep. So you can also email me, rich@gaysagainstgroomers.com. So that's a real easy thing. Just my first name at gaysagainstgroomers.com. And we're going to also continue to fight to protect our children. There's stuff happening in the schools all across the state. This legislative session, we have no idea what's going to happen with that. And we're going to keep the voters and the parents informed about these ballot initiatives.
Well, I've known you for a little while, and I can say you are a hateful, racist person.
Racist? Maybe transphobic. I've been accused of that.
No, it's all hate is hate.
Hate is hate. I like that. I'm going to have to make a shirt with that on there. Hate is hate.
Hate is hate. Rich, thanks so much.
Thanks, John.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.